This is happening.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of We Don't Cater to Your Bullshit. I'm sure YouTube's going to love that being in the first 30 seconds of the video.
Of all the things I thought was going to come out your mouth, that wasn't even on the top 10, dude.
Welcome to the Black Tower Podcast.
I don't know how much rum I have in here now. Probably a lot.
Not enough or too much. You'll find out eventually. Anyway, we're the Black Tower Podcast. We're a Wheel of Time podcast.
It's true.
We talk about the Wheel of Time, the books, statements. The TV show, the companions.
I'll swear it on the
does and does not have a mustache any longer because they shaved it off and no one knew until we saw them in person. Things of that nature. So, yeah, that's what we talk about. No need to put other shit in it because that's unnecessary.
No, all killer, no filler.
Yeah. I'm a little annoyed with some shit in real life. If that's probably coming across pretty clearly.
You know what? This is our therapy though, so it's okay.
Yeah.
You know, just taint. Taint.
This is what I wish, like, all of the like online fandoms were for all the different things that I'm fans of. Just talking about what you're a fan of, so that it's a nice escape from reality, rather than bringing reality into the fandoms all the time.
Right.
It would be nice, but it's not what happens because this is the real world and humans are fallible, and some people just can't not do that.
It's true. And you know what?
That's
okay.
It's your experience on your internet, so you enjoy yourself, because I can always go and just not look at it. So
that is okay.
Yeah.
Got. You ready for this? Yeah. I'm excited about tonight's episode because we're talking about a piece of the Wheel of Time that absolutely translates into real life. Okay. And this is awesome. But I'm actually doing like the last minute like grabbing stuff because I want illustrations of tonight's of this topic because it's amazing. It's actual wizardry when you look at it.
Yeah. Well, while you're grabbing stuff, I'm Andrew. I'm your Bajan Mahale here. He's Josh.
It's true.
Sorvan Mahale, the Mahale of currently grabbing illustrations, because he doesn't love pretty pictures.
Well, I guess I get one. You get one picture tonight, and that's fine.
Damn, that's it.
That's it. That's one. One's all I need, apparently. Now I got to remember where to put it.
I got an idea of where you can put it.
I know where you can put it.
Where are you going to put a tree that big? Bend over and I'll show you.
Bend over and I'll show you.
Anyway. Yeah. So if you want to get early access or if you want to get access to our pre-recordings and some exclusive Discord channels, we need to work it back to where we're a little behind on episodes from where we normally are. We're normally like recording a week and a half in advance. That fell off with a bunch of stuff happening and life getting in the way, and then the Gathering Madness. So we're going to try our best to work and get back to that so that we're giving the patrons the episodes about a week and a half early. Trying to do all that kind of stuff while working on all the other things we still need to do for Black Tower Podcasts and our own lives. But if you want to be a little more involved in that and be able to ask questions a little bit more about that, there you go. Yeah. Me trying to hold on to my last sane brain cell.
Just reminder that's a thing that exists.
Yeah. That's a pretty good picture. Tasty shampoo too, by the way. So keep using that one.
It's a bar shampoo, first off. So nicely done. Secondly, look how good my braid is. Like, that's a good braid. I did good.
Why does my beard tuck in like that at the end like that?
I don't know.
It like curls in on itself. That's weird.
That's weird, yo.
I don't know.
I don't either.
I don't know. The hair on my head does that if it gets long enough. Like now, like if I don't keep this in the ponytail and I just let it like go to the side, you'll see like almost ringlets, but it like my hair naturally curls after a certain length. So that's why I
You
like.
should grow it out. You should grow it out like mine, and we should see like because I've got really straight hair that doesn't have a lot of body.
Right,
We should
I
get
don't think I
yours
could
to grow.
handle walking around with the voluminous like curly hair that I would have, and the looks of jealousy I would get from just
From
the
everyone.
natural goodness of my hair.
Well, there is that. At
I don't
least you
know.
recognize your
There's a lot
glorious
more
hair.
gray in it now than there used to be, so and it's getting worse.
Cheetos.
Bruh, there was one day I was just sitting there and like the hair had fallen in front of my face because I didn't have it like up in the ponytail. I was like letting it dry from the shower or something. And I just noticed like a whole freaking Borg collective of gray hairs. So I
Oh
just like
no.
grabbed them all, wrapped them around my finger, and like yanked them out, and it actually hurt. And it was like 10 gray hairs all in one little bundle.
I've got
So
which side is it on? I've got this mole over here
uh
that has got a whole streak of gray hairs coming out of it. And
uh
eventually I'm going to have a little gray streak on the left side of my face. That's going to happen
yeah.
eventually.
I'll get bored at work, and I think I've said this before, but my coworkers will see me just sitting there like doing this through my beard and plucking like all gray hairs. But uh, life gives you gray hairs, man. That's what it does. And I don't even have kids. I can't even imagine, right? I'm pretty sure, like the instant I have a child, my entire like head is just gonna go. It's gonna be like that episode of Family Guy where Peter gets locked in the basement and gets scared so bad all of his hair turns white and he starts a ghost hunting show or something.
I love it. I think that's a
Yeah,
great idea for you.
yeah.
I think that's great for you.
Anyway, what's a great
I
idea for
am.
you is to head on over to blacktowerpod.com and click on the
Yeah.
Patreon button so that you can get the stickers we send out. And at certain tiers, there's the fun challenge coins that go out. You can get all that stuff and get a little extra info on us and or on the show and some channels where you can like recommend topics and stuff and pretty much just like directly access like, hey, what's going on with this? What's going on with that? Not that nobody else can, but you have unique direct access kind of for us to answer the question. And you help support what we do here and make it happen. So you have even more even more of a reason to get a response
Even
from us to actually
more.
answer your question rather than, hey, we're working on it. So
Even more.
even more.
More taint. More spice.
So there's
More
that.
zest.
And since we're starting like almost an entire hour late, we'll go ahead and get a quick spoiler warning done and out of the way. This episode of Black Tower Podcast will contain spoilers from the entirety of the Wheel of Time book series and the currently released television series as we know it, which is all of season 1 and season 2 on Amazon Prime. If it's after that and we do spoil it from the TV show, we're geniuses because we called it way ahead of time. Not our fault
It's
because
true.
all that stuff isn't out for us to censor yet, or
It's true.
not censor, but not spoil. Not that we wouldn't spoil it anyway because we're a full spoiler show.
We are.
There will also be spoilers from the Wheel of Time Companion, the big white book of bad arts, and the Origins of the Wheel of Time by Dr. Michael Livingston.
Who is gloriously uh, facial fur free.
Do you think he had like, you know, like when you retire like an American flag and you do the official ceremony and everything and burn it? Do you think like he had like a retirement ceremony for his mustache?
That is a good question.
Yeah.
We should have thought to ask him that.
I don't know
Was
how he did it
there a
because I
retirement
keep
ceremony?
having nightmares that I decided to shave my beard. Like randomly, I'll randomly have nightmares where I've just shaved. And I wake up
I
and I'm like, "Oh, oh, oh, thank God."
I don't have that problem, but I did do like the facial filter on Snapchat to like see what I would look like without a beard. And it was like having a hard time registering the difference between beard and neck. And it looked like I had a big fat neck.
Oh, yeah.
And it was funny. It was really funny. So there you go. There's your spoiler warning. Also, my intro is that I'm Josh and I'm the Sword of on Mahale, as it says right here. when you just look right here to where I am pointing. And yeah, we're excited. I'm excited to talk about this topic tonight because, like I said, it translates into the real world very, very easily. And I have to figure, I have to feel like Robert Jordan knew this, um, and wanted to make it a part of the books, and he does from book one. But we get specifics in, what is it, Winter's Heart, or is it Path of Daggers?
I think it's Pod. I'm pretty sure it's Path of Daggers.
I think you're right. I think you're right.
Wait, hold on, wait. What's the question again?
When when does he have his big forging moment?
Oh, that's Towers of Midnight.
Towers of Midnight. Okay.
Yeah, because I remember it's like a really cool thing that we also don't get to see until it's almost the end of the
because again,
series.
Perrin is the ultimate edge lord who edges us the entire books. And we get like little.
You can only be an edgelord if you knowingly edge, and Perrin like rarely knowingly does a lot of
Touche.
stuff.
So we're talking about power wrought weapons, forging of power wrought weapons, and specifically the forging of Mahalanir, which is probably one of the most badass weapons in the book series. I will say that. It is definitely one of my favorites. The story of the forging of Mahalanir is one of my top 5 favorite scenes in the entirety of the Wheel of Time. I love it. I love it so much.
Mm-hmm. No, it's a cool scene. I really like the way that it's depicted, or not really depicted, described to us. I think it's described really well, really cool. The process is really cool. The fact that like it's not just only from Perrin's POV that we get it, like, you know, that Robert Jordan and Brandon Sanderson decided to include like input and thoughts and statements from other people that are there watching it. It's also really cool that it's not just, you know, one dude sitting there. Well, I mean, obviously he couldn't do it by himself because Perrin can't channel.
Right.
But you know, sometimes you have these characters that have like these incredible breakthroughs, and you don't get a lot from the process as it's happening. Like, not when Nynaeve heals like Logain, like she kind of talks through it, but
Yeah.
it's not like super incredibly detailed but she's also like running entirely on feel. Like she's not
She's
like
also half distracted. Like she's not really paying a lot of attention to what she's doing. She's kind of processing her own emotions whilst delving Logain.
Yeah. Well, because normally all she does is like poke and prod and try to figure things out.
Right.
And when she heals Logain, she's like trying to patch things up so that she can poke and prod further. She doesn't really realize what she's doing as she's doing it until it's like done, and she just kind of snaps back and is like, "Oh, like, oh shit."
I love that scene so much too. Logain's eyes just go. She flips out.
Yeah, I mean, which I think is a pretty fair reaction. So
for real though.
Yeah. But the scene with Perrin forging Mahalanir, basically like he's just mentally like kind of just fucking he's super stressed. And he's just trying to work through some shit in his mind and just wants to get his mind off of things, which we've seen him do before when he goes to different forges. And there's like the one town he went to, and he went to the forge next door and was helping like the blacksmith there, like make horseshoes and shit.
Yeah.
And the guy was like, "Man, you're great. If you want a job, you can have it." And Perrin's like, "Oh, no, thanks. I was just working through some shit in my brain."
I'm just like, an apprentice
anyway. What do you
anyway.
mean? And it's like, the fuck you mean? Like, you could make a killing. And he's like, yeah, I could. I don't know about that, but I got other things to do. Like, you know, help save the world because my best friend from my childhood is the Dragon Reborn. Sorry, guy.
Right.
Um, but in this one, like, I think was he in one of their camps? No, it wasn't a camp because they didn't have a. No, yeah, they did because
Yeah.
he had basically it was a mobile forge that he was at
Yeah.
because they have like this whole army that's marching around with him.
Well, and
And
he's at the sort of a climax of a whole ass mental breakdown. He is really struggling. Like he doesn't, he's doing the whole hammer or axe, hammer or axe. He's
Mhm.
just, they've just freed Fail and all the sort of nastiness that came along with that he had to perpetrate. He's really struggling to find his place in the world, his
and I
role.
think it hasn't been that long since Hopper died the final death, too.
Hmm.
So he's trying to deal with that. Um, let's see, hold on. Um, yeah, so this is immediately after, like, so they have a captive Shido. So this is like events leading up to his like mental breakdown shit. So um he's already struggling in between the hammer and the axe, and he has been for a while. And that's where Elias like kind of wound up giving him a thing like, when you no longer hate the axe, that's the time to get rid of it.
Right.
Um and Perrin's kind of like on the cusp of that. So he'll be in the Wolf Dream or Teleron Riyadh, and he'll be carrying his hammer, but it'll keep flickering back and forth between the hammer and the axe and the hammer and the axe. As he's trying to deal with all this shit. And then um they're trying to get information on where Fail is from Shido captives because they've been getting in off and on skirmishes with the Shido that they're chasing down, trying to rescue Fail. And to the point where like they've like parents even been okay with one of Masima's men, Hari, torturing the Shido for information.
Yes. Which is
And
where
it's
he.
not working.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So it's not working. And Perrin like is at this point so pissed, so desperate, so distraught that he looks at this Shido and several others and is like, I will just start cutting off pieces of you and leaving you in the street, basically. I think Hari actually made the threat, but Perrin's just like, yeah, yeah, we'll do that. And the
He.
Shido are like, whatever, you're not going to do it. And then Perrin does it. Like he chops a Shido's hand off. Like the dude's bound, he's captive.
Yeah.
And Perrin just cuts his hand off with the axe.
And then has the Ice
And
Guy heal him.
yeah, and walks out. But as
Brutal.
soon as he walks out, like he's like back, just like he was distraught once he realized that he killed the White Cloaks, all the way back in Eye of the World. He's back in the same way, and this is whenever he like looks at the axe and like just launches it out into the woods, and it lands in a tree, and he's like, "Yep, gonna leave that there. I don't need it anymore." Um, so he's still trying to deal with all this in his head, and he's kind of like, the way we read or we're able to read it as he's going through this is he's basically taking stock of like how he feels about violence and what violence actually means. And I know there's a point where it comes up in his mind where Hopper, when he's like talking about like how he prefers the hammer because the hammer isn't dangerous like the axe is. And Hopper's like, they're both dangerous, like
Yeah.
they're both deadly. um and basically parents trying to figure out like the difference between the axe and the hammer, which is like him trying to figure out the difference between uh violence and peace, especially like necessary violence and peace, and
Right.
unnecessary violence and peace. And he finally comes to, as he's thinking about this all as he's forging, and he finally like figures out the difference about the time that Mjolnir is forged completely, in that an axe can only be used for killing, like because obviously it's like a war axe style thing.
Right.
Whereas the hammer has the capacity to kill or create. And
Which
that's
is
whenever he kind of realizes that while he's been doing this, he's been forging this massive hammer with like a wedged, a kind of wedged pike on the end, like almost. I think is it like almost like an axe blade on the end, or is it like a pike?
it's a spike.
No, it's just a tapered edge.
Oh, it's
It's
a
just like
tapered
a
end. Yeah,
tapered.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's just like a tapered down wedge, like you would use if you were trying to
Oh,
like split through and spread out two pieces of metal.
yeah.
Because the whole time he's
Interestingly
doing
enough, it
this,
is
like,
actually a blacksmith's hammer that he
yeah,
forges. He just forges a really big one.
yeah. And in doing this, like he's not really paying attention to what anybody else is doing, like Nailed or however you want to say his name, like comes in and could see that like, Perrin's pretty distraught and is just trying to work through shit, and he's like just trying to help. He's like, hey, we're pretty good with channeling like and keeping things at temperature. I could keep it at the forging temperature you want for you to make it easier for you. And Perrin's like, oh yeah, that'd be great. Go ahead and do it. And so he's just going about doing his thing. And Naold is like, oh, cool. I have an idea. I'm not going to talk to you about it. I'm just going to start doing it. And then the other Ashaman there are like, the fuck are you doing?
It's
And this is where the
Grady.
title for this episode comes from. Yeah,
Yeah.
Grady's like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, what are you doing? And Naold is just like, I don't know. It just feels right. Um, and then like you kind of get to this like weirdly actiony crescendo of a non-real action scene, but it's really suspenseful and everything. Where he demands a link with the wise ones that are
Yeah.
there and Grady, and he's like, I don't have time to explain. Just link. Let me do it now. You got to do it now. Um, and this all like kind of culminates in Molinir being forged. And by the time it's forged, and before like it's still setting in to everybody, like kind of what happened. Like parents looking around and being like, "Oh, there's an audience. Wait, what happened?"
Oh,
Nailed and
also,
Grady,
the top of this hill is entirely singed.
yeah,
And the hammer I've
yeah,
been using is worn down to an actual nub.
yeah. There's like nothing left of it, and they're kind of all coming to terms with what happened. Nailed and Grady are like, just being like, "What? This is the first time a power wrought weapon has been forged since like the breaking of the world."
Yeah.
Um, and the wise ones there are just kind of like they're impressed, but also like they don't fully get what just happened because they couldn't see what Nailed and them were doing. They could just kind of feel that they were using a lot of power
Well, until they linked,
because it
right?
takes
Because
a
when
lot.
you link, you can see the flows.
No, I didn't think you. I didn't think Link you could see the flows of the other side of the power.
I thought you could.
I didn't think you could. I think you could just kind of direct it, but you can't really see it. I thought it like were kind of like an Angreal, like it would add to your power. Because if you can see the other, like if you link and now you can see Sidene or Sidair, why wouldn't you just link in the battlefield all the time so that you could see the weaves instead of having to learn how to
That's what
cut
I'm
weaves
saying.
you
That's
can't
what I
see?
think they do, though.
I didn't think it did.
I'm looking
I
right
could be
now.
wrong. I don't know. Well, while you look for that,
Well, because it says that a link can be led by either men or women, so I would
mhm.
imagine that would. Is it? Would it just be the leader then that is the only one that can see?
I still don't think they can see the other weaves. I think it's just like it adds into their own power. Because there's
Oh,
nothing that says that like weaving that you have to weave Sidene and Sidair differently to do the same thing. Like ultimately, it's all still the one power.
yeah.
It's all still the five main elements of the power. So if you weave water and air in a certain way with Sidene, it should have the same effect if you weaved it the exact same way with Sidair.
Right.
They've just learned to do it differently.
Huh.
because like whenever you're linked, you're also like if you're linked with Sidene and Sidair channelers, you're using a combination of your powers. You're not just using one or the other.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying though, where leadership of the link can be passed to a man or a woman. Like that would imply so if we've got men and women in the circle and say a man is leading the circle and he's channeling Sidene, the women can only feel the power going through them. They can't see anything, right? But if that gets passed to a woman, suddenly that blinks off for the men and turns on for the women because now all of a sudden it's Sidar.
Oh, let's see. One channeler leads, while the others are simply used as conduits. Although the strength of a link group is not quite as high as combined individual strength, allows more precise and effective weaves that could be controlled by an individual. Circles limited several ways. Blah 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 blah. Circle formation, leadership. Link is formed. Only one of them guides the flows for the weave. The channeler chosen to guide the flow is the leader of the link. Person is also the one who decides when the circle ends. Within the confines of certain gender-based limitations, control of the circle is usually determined by what skills are necessary for the task. May pass between numerous individuals during the circle. It's not necessary for one person to lead it. Control can be passed to a man or a woman, but some circles limit which gender must lead. Blah 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 blah. Um,
So,
Here, I've talked a long time about my learning. You talk about that, and I'm gonna try to find an answer to this.
well, anyway, so okay, so regardless of whether or not they can see the flows, you've got Jura Grady, you've got Nailed. I can never remember his first name, but Nailed is the one who starts doing it. Jura Grady comes over and says, "What are you doing?" And Nailed says, "It just feels right." He says, "Link with me now." They start doing the thing, and they both start getting exhausted. But the thing is you need a woman to initiate the link. So he asks the wise ones to come over and help facilitate that. As they start getting tired, though, the wise ones are like, okay, everybody in, all the channelers here now. Something is happening and we need to facilitate this. Perrin even describes that he feels something coming out of him, uh, uh, oozing into the metal, leaking, seeping into the metal itself from him as well. They create this hammer, and I think one of the things that makes this scene so beautiful is it starts out like you said, mundane. He's just at the
Mhm.
forge with a chunk of metal, tink tink tink, bonk, tink tink tink, and he's just trying his hardest to figure out where he belongs. What is his place in this world? What's happening? He's just processing. He's working through it. Nailed comes over and is like, "Hey, I can keep that hot for you if it'll help." And parents like, "Yes, warm it up to a nice yellow color, not too hot." And then he gets it up there, and he's like, "Cool, thanks." And parent just goes right back into it. He's in his own headspace. Nothing outside exists. What is that a parallel to? The flame in the void. He is literally taking everything and just pouring it into this hammer and going, what is happening? What am I doing? Where do I belong? Who do I belong with? Who am I? What is my role in all this? And Nailed is kind of, I'm going to say he's kind of drawn in by the Taviran, by the pull of Taviran, and starts messing with the flows a little bit. Grady says, you're doing the thing. They all link. And when you get to the end of this scene, everybody else is straining, sweating, pouring every last bit of energy into it. I think one of the wise ones even says at one point to find everyone who can channel and bring them here now because we need to continue this, right? And so they're going. And at the end of it, Perrin kind of looks up and he's just like, oh, wow, when did all these people get here? Oh, wow, why is all of the grass around the forge scoured? Why are there a handful of channelers here sweating and breathing hard like they just ran a freaking marathon. And they realize that Perrin's just made the first power wrought weapon. And this is where the conversation we just had comes in, is that now, you know, we need to figure out a way for the wise ones to learn this. Now we need to figure out a way to teach this skill to others so that we can provide. I think it's Bear Lane who originally starts saying, hey, we should do this again. We should start doing power wrought weapons for our armies for the last battle, because that just makes a lot of sense, and we need to take any edge we can into the last battle. I think it's awesome. Oh, so it's 6 wise ones.
Mm.
Um, but this is just a really great scene, because like I said, it starts so unassuming, and it has a stillness in chaos element to it that I love. You've got Perrin, who is just of single sound mind,
Mm.
working and processing his emotions, trying to figure out what's going on. You've got these channelers that are just struggling to hang on to dear life. And what you've got is you've got a piece of steel that is essentially being enhanced by the one power. You've got Nailed, who's like, yeah, I can just put some fire in there and heat it up so that you can manipulate it. But then he starts doing other things as well. I don't think there's an account of which specific uh, of weaves that he uses. Like I'm assuming there's some spirit in there. I'm assuming there's some earth, but I don't know. Probably even a secondary use of fire. But where I find this to be interesting is that power wrought weapons in the Wheel of Time are sort of like a level up to the regular cache of weapons. And in the Wheel of Time, a power wrought weapon, as we know, can never be damaged and has kind of a +1 damage to shadow spawn, right? Or at
Mm.
least Mahalanir does. And so like a power wrought sword can never be damaged. Um, it stays sharp. You can never dull the blade. And it's really, really great. Well, the thing that I love about this particular thing and how it plays into our real world is there are legends of old Viking swords, the Ulfbert swords. And if you don't know what an Ulfbert sword is, look it up. It is fantastic. It is absolutely fascinating to watch. And what you see here is you've got these particular swords that were stronger and more springy than regular swords. So they didn't break, the temper didn't break, they didn't bend out of the way, they didn't snap or shatter like some other swords did, and they always spring back. So if you stab it into a shield and your sword bends, it would spring back to true. And the Ulfbert sword was widely regarded as a magic sword. Now, science has basically just said, no, it's a really good steel. They suspect it's crucible steel, which cool, right? But it becomes very interesting when we look at the difference between iron and steel, because I don't know if you know this or not, Andrew. Do you know what the difference between iron and steel is?
The difference between iron and steel.
Yeah, because
I know
iron is an
steel.
element and steel is not.
Yeah, well, I know. So steel comes from reforging iron and purifying it further, at least in part. I don't know if there's more to it than that.
There is. Chemically, there is more to it. So are you ready for this? I'm going to put up this illustration. I love this because this makes me so happy.
Yeah.
So I'm going to pull up this picture here. Now, the top image is an iron molecule, right? This is what iron looks like. It's a cube. It's cubic in shape chemically, and it this is how it stacks. This is the grain patterns. This is how this works. Well, what happens to metal when you heat it up? It expands, right? It grows, it gets larger. So these molecules, these different atoms within this molecule spread out and become further apart when it's hot. So then, if you notice the bottom illustration, and you notice I only had to do one illustration because this is awesome, it's got extra little black circles in there. That's carbon. That's all it is. It is pure carbon, which is also elemental. And the process of turning iron into steel is by heating up the iron until the molecule separates, gets further and further apart, and then incorporating carbon into that so that when the molecule gets cool, what cools back down and shrinks back down to its normal size, all those carbon atoms get stuck inside the iron. And that is what steel is. Right? So,
Mhm.
literally a process of magic. Literally taking carbon and iron and fusing them together by just adding heat, and you've drastically changed what iron is. It's stronger, it's more springy, it'll retain an edge better, it's harder, it's everything about it is improved just by adding a couple of carbon molecules in there. This When I think about that process, when I think about something like that, because like the old the Japanese tamahagane, the bloom steel that they make, it's just a big, basically furnace, and they put iron sand in the top and a lot of carbon in the form of like charcoal, and they light it on fire and they let it go and they smelt it down into a giant chunk of just raw bloom steel or tamahagane, and it looks really crazy, but really all that is just fusing those two things together to make one big giant chunk of beautiful steel.
Mhm.
um and when you start talking about forging process and you start talking about adding the one power into it, all I can think of is now you're imbuing it, in the same way that you imbue iron with carbon to make steel, you imbue steel, because they have steel, you imbue steel with elements from the one power, and you get power wrought weapons. And I geek out over that frequently.
Wasn't
I,
wasn't
I
the
love
process
that
called
concept.
wasn't because there's a process of using channeling. We talked about this. It's a talent that it looks like Nail has
Hmm.
called aligning the matrix. That
Yes.
was used inherently to make metal uh harder and stronger.
Yes.
Because you would do the same thing. It's just like whenever you do the heat and the quench. Well, not the heat and the quench, but you do the after that. Whenever you put it at a low heat to bake for a long amount of time,
To anneal
annealing.
it.
No, yeah,
Annealing.
that's what annealing is supposed to do. If I'm not mistaken, is it's supposed to help release the stress and align the matrix because much like crystals that grow like quartz and stuff, metal structure, metal molecules, and you may have already said this, so sorry if I'm repeating what you've already
No, you're
said,
good.
but they, by their nature, have an inherent desire to kind of try to align flat face against flat face. And doing that and allowing the metal to do that creates a stronger, more durable piece in the end.
Yeah. So annealing, what annealing does is, so you've got you forge out your steel, right? And
Mm,
then you get it up to a critical temperature and then you quench it. Normally, most times we quench it in oil, because the alloys that we use nowadays, the modern alloys that we have access to, um, do better when you quench them in oil. You then, and then of course the Japanese swordsmiths, when they made katanas, they did them in water, and that was a very risky process. You could crack the steel. I mean, it was just very, very risky. But if you did everything right, it would be good.
mm,
Annealing is something that you do to, and it's going to sound a little funny, but after you quench, you've got a certain hardness on the blade that you just quenched. annealing, what annealing does is that, because okay, we see this concept a lot with Rand, right? He says, do I need to be hard or do I need to be strong? And there's this debate between hard or strong, which do I need to be? And this is the quest for the perfect steel in modern day, in our world, is the perfect balance between hard and strong, because those two are very different attributes. The process of annealing is to take, because when you quench it, you've got a hardness of X, and maybe it's too hard. Maybe that's, if it's too hard, it'll shatter, it'll break. So what you do is you anneal it to bring it down to a hardness that is a little bit more supple, a little bit more workable, a little bit more flexible, so that, in the case of a knife, or even more important, a sword, you don't have um, you don't have a situation in which you're going to break your sword the first time you use it.
Yeah. So that's why with the katanas they do the clay treatment because it prevents the edge of the blade from going through the same degree of annealing as the
They're
spine. Because for a good katana, you want that very strong, non-moving edge,
hmm
but you want the very flexible annealed spine.
and they actually use two
Gotcha.
different kinds of steel for that. So
Yeah.
they actually use two different pieces of steel. So the higher carbon content gives you a harder blade, lower carbon content gives you a softer blade, a more supple. So they use the softer steel in the spine, and they use the harder steel for the edge. And then I might have that backwards. Either way, point is, the spine holds the rigidity of the blade, the edge holds the sharpness, or yeah, the front piece holds the edge of the blade, and then they use the clay to help maintain that.
Yeah, it protects the edge whenever they go to anneal the rest of it
Exactly.
from going through the same, I say the same degree, because clay is not a perfect insulator. It's not like aerogel or whatever.
But that's with the case of katana, and I can already hear the sword bros coming after us. Look, stop. The katana was absolutely a marvel of engineering, and the fact that they figured it out when they did, it was amazing, and the katana deserves all props. Shut up. Go
I
away.
mean, and even if you don't like the katana, you can look at the absolute abundance of other sword and dagger style things that the Japanese made using these same
Yes.
processes and the same techniques.
Well, and there's
No.
there's even, like, so Viking swords. There were even Viking swords that kind of used this same technique. They had what was called a core, and they would have a core of one kind of steel and then another kind of steel wrapped around that core to allow it to be supple on the inside and hard
Mhm.
on the outside to maintain the edge.
Wasn't
Um,
wasn't there something about the Ulfbert sword that made it like it's made to look like it's the most common Viking sword ever, but it really wasn't because they were stupid
yeah,
expensive and hard to make?
that's the thing. And the Ulfbert sword, like the katana, was a much higher quality of steel. Like, the quality of steel in an Ulfbert sword or in a katana rivals that of the quality of steel that we have when it comes to looking at inclusions, or the purity of the steel, or things like that. They
Mhm.
really, really, really did a great job of making sure that the steel was pure. It didn't have inclusions in it, because inclusions create weak points. Inclusions create points when you do the quench specifically. If you have an inclusion in that steel, it will break. It will snap. That steel will absolutely, you'll hear it, you'll feel it. It's not pretty. So, and that, which is another reason why people use oil instead of water, because oil is a little bit more forgiving than water
Well,
is.
yeah, so, like, they're both great in so water and oil are both great in terms of thermodynamics of absorbing and pushing and removing, great temperature differences from the other. Oil does it slightly slower than water, which is
Yeah,
better for the steel.
right.
Even though, like, they're like, the whole idea of quenching is getting it done super fast, super quick. There is, like, a too fast kind of thing.
Yeah, and all you're
And
trying to do there is you're
oil seems
trying
to be about
to
that happy medium for
yeah,
most stuff.
and all you're trying to do there is you're trying to get the steel to crystallize very, very quickly. That's what you want.
Yeah.
You want the steel to form steel crystals because that's the other thing. Metal is a crystal. Look at this picture again. That's a crystal shape. That is one of the shapes of crystal. It is a cubic crystal pattern.
Which is why aligning the matrix works.
Exactly. And if you can even Google it and you can go, let's see, iron crystal.
There's a guy that does a lot of forging on YouTube. His name is Alex Steele. He's a British guy,
I
and I
love
love
Alex
watching a
Steele.
lot of his stuff.
I
He
love
did an
Alex Steele.
entire video just testing quenching and a bunch of other shit. Like he does water and oil. He still sticks with oil, but he also did like I think he quenched in mayonnaise. Like he did a bunch of random stuff just to see how it would work. And ultimately, shocker, oil was still the best one for the most consistent results.
Yeah.
But
Yep. And so
uh,
yeah, so I think that's actually really interesting that iron or that metal at its most basic structure is a crystal.
it's
And
a
you can find
crystalline
plates.
structure.
Well, but you can find like silver.
Mhm.
You can find silver crystals that are just
Yeah.
pure silver in a
Was it
crystalline
crystalline,
state.
like less of a reference to a material and more of a reference to the molecular structure?
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. If the molecular structure is a, a crystalline shape, there's only like I want to say there's 6 different crystal shapes. Quartz
Mhm.
has a shape. That's why every type of quartz comes out looking the same way. Diamond has a shape. That's why it has a crystalline shape. Like these
So I'm
are
only making the distinction because to people that aren't as knowledgeable about metal or like rocks and minerals and stuff as you are, you say crystal, they're like most people are gonna think, oh, so you're saying like steel or iron is the same as quartz, and it's not. Like calling something a crystal is more of a reference to is a reference to the structure
oh
of the
sure.
molecules, not the
Yes.
material itself.
I'm talking about it being yeah, yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
when
I'm
you
talking
say
about the
something is a
actual
crystal, it's more of like it's an overall classification of its molecular structure, not a
yes.
material in and of itself. Quartz is
Yes.
the material, and it is in a crystalline structure. Just like
Correct.
iron
Yeah,
is a completely different material that has a generally crystalline molecular structure.
exactly. It has a cubic crystalline structure and I'm going to look up.
Fucking fancy. Well, while you're looking up, I got an answer for the question about in a link, can you see both sides of the weaves?
Oh,
The question is yes and no.
okay.
So it is whoever's leading the circle only, and they can't just blanket. So, like Rand, whenever they were cleansing Sidene, this is like the most, I think, in depth example of link channeling we get. He can't just see Sidair everywhere. Like he when he looks at Nynaeve, he doesn't see the glow around her. If he looks at other female channelers,
Right.
which of course he doesn't because he's focused, but
Right.
he doesn't see anybody else channeling Sidene.
Right.
But he can see the power coming from Nynaeve into him and see himself using
Okay.
it. But it it's a little weird because the way he channels it, he thinks of it going to form a tube that he's going to push Sidene through, and it takes on its own intricate flowery type weave structure, which is not exactly what he intended, but it's basically, I guess, like how Sidair interpreted what his Sidene brain wanted. Because the other interesting thing that I don't know if I just never thought about it, never realized it, or whatever, is whenever he creates that flower lattice structure that he pushes Sidene through,
Right.
anybody else looking from the outside, all they would see is this big flower-like structure of Sidair in the sky, if they could see Sidair. They wouldn't see a long lattice or anything stretching into the distance or to shatter Logoth or anything.
Okay.
They would just see like a 2D flower just floating in the air. And
Right.
from Rand's point of view, he sees the lattice, and it's not that the flower lattice or the strain or whatever you want to call it goes directly to Shadar Logoth. For him, when he looks through it, he can't see the end, but it stretches from where he is in that point in time out to the pattern and Shadar Logoth. Not Shadar Logoth, Shao Gul. I believe it said Shao Gul. No, Shadar Logoth. So, like, it's stretching across the entirety of the pattern. Basically, it's not actually touching Shadar Logoth. It's touching the pattern, and then as he's pushing Sidene through, all the taint's being siphoned off and is falling into Shadar Logoth. And then the way it works is almost like, as long as he keeps pushing Sidene through, the taint continues to get siphoned off into Shadar Logoth, almost like if you've ever seen anybody siphon gas the old school way.
Right.
You know, where you put the hose down in the gas tank and you you literally use it like a straw until you get gas, and then you just turn it up,
And then you
turn it
go,
over. Yeah, and it just keeps going that way. Uh, so that would mean that when Naald was linked, finishing up the power wrought Ma'aleneer for Perrin, he would have been able to selectively see the portions of Sidair that he might have been using. But it seems like you can see them, but there's almost like a bit of like automatic guidance where there's like a bit of like where what your desire and what you're trying to do with the weaves is translated over into a way to make sense for Sidair, so that you don't necessarily have to change the way that you channel. The reason it's different for Rand is because he's accessing both Sidair and Sidene to do something completely different with each. And that's why what makes it such an
okay,
even more amazingly notable feat what he does, because he has to simultaneously wrestle control of Sidene while surrendering control of Sidair
which
to get it
which they
done.
actually give us a description of that. He's like, "Whoa, what the hell is this?"
Yeah. So
Huh.
yeah, so that's how that's working. So he can selectively see the power he is using as power coming from Nynaeve into him through the Angreal they were using as well, and doing what he did with it, but he just couldn't blanket see Sidair. So it's like a yes and no. You can see what you're actively using. So the thing I didn't like was there was one statement somewhere where someone was like, "Oh, you can't weave what you can't see," and I'm like, "Yeah, that's not true."
Yeah, no, we debunked that one.
But
Um,
so
no,
anyway,
but this
now I
is
would have been able to like, kind of see the power coming from them, but I would imagine for the link purposes, it would just feel like using more of the power. Like you probably wouldn't really make that much of a distinction between the different ones, because none of the other than the other links around the cleansing of Sidene referencing how vile Sidene is to all of the female channelers, they don't really reference anything different than that. So, which would make
well,
sense because
and
nobody else is trying to use both sides of the power at the same time to do different things.
yeah.
So,
Well, and I even love at the end of the cleansing, you've got Aes Sedai who have bonded Ashaman warders, and you've got, you know, all kinds of different scenarios happening, and they're linking with uh their male channelers and going, I don't feel the vileness that you guys are describing. Like that's not coming across. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't feel that. Um, and so as a result, some people still kind of don't believe it, and some people do, and that's great. But some people are still kind of like,
oh yeah. I mean,
and
again, you're trying to erase 3,000 years of this whole side is bad and dangerous.
Yeah.
Plus, like, you still like the madness doesn't immediately disappear. And for
Yeah.
some, like your boy Rand, it'll never disappear. Well, I mean it does. Actually, yeah, that's the other thing. Quick tangent. Whenever he body swaps with Morden, he is now in a body completely free of madness.
Correct.
Because Morden was completely protected the entire time
Yes.
he was able to use the source.
Mm-hmm.
So imagine being Morden, you finally get your chance to die, you get swapped into a body, and you immediately feel like fucking Mama Boucher's brain pain. You're just like, what the fuck?
Ileana! Why the fuck do I care about her?
I mean, because she also said no to him. So there's that.
Yeah.
Wasn't that part of it? Didn't he also like kind of like have a thing for Ileana and was kind of pissed that he didn't
Dude, it wouldn't
like he was
surprise
there
me.
and it was either
Wouldn't
him or
surprise.
Damage Red, whoever was number two.
Number 2.
I don't know. They weren't first, so
Um,
they were last.
I I don't know. When it comes to using the power to, here's the other thing though, but here's where we lose it when it comes, because when it comes to applying the power and specifically the forging of Mahalanir, does it say that Perrin quenches the hammer?
No, he never does. That's the crazy thing. But if we're to take Naald's talent,
Does that matter with the power
Perrin,
being added?
If you conventional blacksmithing, it's a bit of a weird thing that Perrin never did. Perrin absolutely should have. That should have been in his nature to quench. But Naald has the talent of aligning the matrix. So ultimately, it doesn't need to be done because Naald is able to go ahead and do what quenching would have done.
Right.
So that is a bit of a weird thing. Hold on. Why did Perrin forget to quench? Well, he
Okay,
goes into it without the intent to make. He just goes into it with the intent to forge something.
here's what I'm willing to say. Are you ready? I'm willing to
Do you
say
quench something that husky, that
yes.
thick?
Yes. Here's what I'm willing to say. I'm willing to say that the power that Nailed was using was going into the hammer, and where Perrin said that he felt something of himself being imparted onto the hammer,
Mhm.
two things happened here. One, the item in question did not need to be quenched because it had been enhanced by the one power. And two, Perrin had a sense of the hammer's completion because a piece of him was imparted into the hammer.
Oh yeah, he feels something leaking from him, as if each blow infused the metal with his own strength and his own feelings. Both worries and hopes, these flowed from him into the three unwrought pieces.
So I think there's a
So,
connection there. I think there's, and because they even talk about forging power wrought weapons later, and they
mm,
say that nothing is ever as involved as it was with Perrin, but the weaves are still the same. They're just not. They
yeah.
just aren't as intense. So my guess is that, again, we've got something that we can translate into real life, because I go to work
And
every
into the
day.
ring he poured his malice and his hatred.
Exactly. I go to work every day. I don't phone it in, right? I don't phone it in. Like, I do a good job. I work. I make my clients happy. I make my customers happy, and I have a good time with it. Is it my sole solitary focus? Is it something that I put every ounce of my concentration and energy into? No. Would
Hmm.
it be different if I did? Yes. But I do my job. I do my job well, and I'm damn good at what I do. So why there is a difference between showing up and working, which is what any blacksmith is going to do. They're going to create good arrowheads, good spear tips,
Mhm.
good, you know, belt knives, good bucklers. Like they're going to create those things good. And they're going to create quality things because they know that the people who are going to receive these things, their lives depend on the quality of these items. That's not the case here. With Perrin, there is an element of his involvement because he is so deeply emotionally invested in this process and he doesn't even realize it.
Yeah. Well, so we talked about the making. Let's talk about the absolute bonkers shit this hammer can do. And let's just skip to like what I think is like just the surface value at surface value, the most absolute bonkers thing it can do. The power wrought hammer that can permanently kill dark hounds.
It's
You know what
got
else they've been able to use thus far that could kill dark hounds? Balefire.
balefire.
That's it.
And I believe this is the first weapon that can do damage, significant damage to dark hounds. Because what was it when the first time we see dark hounds, we see a pack of them tracking everybody down. Rand busts out his bow and arrow and he's like, I'm going to fire arrows at this thing.
Well, they
And he
do
ends
it.
up
It all
killing
hurts them,
one.
like, but this is like the only one that does like damage that doesn't get like just slugged off.
And that's what I was just going to go with. There's like a pack of like 6. And Rand like launches a dozen arrows. All of them meet their mark. And it takes that many arrows to drop this fucking Darkhound. And he's like, oh, now I understand what Lan means, that the sword is not going to help.
Well, yeah.
And
Well,
like,
he doesn't even the Darkhound doesn't even permanently die
yeah.
because he does the same thing when they're in Cold Rock's hold. He runs through and he's like slashing the shit out of Darkhounds. And luckily, he's at this point still got Tam's sword, so it doesn't like start melting or whatever. Because we know Darkhound blood is corrosive to metal. And they're like, oh, he's dead. And Moraine, like, doesn't she like balefire over his shoulder to kill one that's about to like hit him?
I mean, I know Balefire is the only thing they have that works.
Yeah. Well, I'm talking about like Rand like slices one up, thinks it's dead, and is walking away, and then doesn't Moraine show up and like balefire the one he thought he killed because it's getting back up and about to attack him from behind or
Oh,
something.
yeah. Yeah, no, yeah.
So
And he ends up using Balefire as well,
yeah,
and
on
she
whenever he
gets
gets
all
to the
mad
one
at
that's
him
in front of
about
the
it.
map, sure. Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, she used a very small, very tiny little choo, and he's just like rods from God sized balefire.
Balefire, 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 Balefire,
Yeah.
Balefire, Balefire.
But yeah, so on the surface, that's absolutely bonkers. The thing that I think might be more under the surface bonkers about Ma'alanir is its other kind of ability. So it's warm to the touch for Perrin.
Yes.
It seems to burn both Shadow Spawn. It's a really weird distinction to make. Both Shadow Spawn and anyone on the receiving end of its blows.
Dude,
How does it make the distinction?
well, by having a piece of Perrin's soul in it. So, okay. So I believe we're talking about 2 stat effects here. Actually, I'm going to say 3. We've got 3 stat effects. Oh. I'm going to say at bit minimum 2, debatable 3. We're going to start with the first one. The first one is +2 damage to Shadow Spawn, right? He hits a Trolloc, it sizzles against their skin. It is a +2 to Shadow Spawn damage stat
Across the board.
increase across the board. It doesn't matter who's holding it. If someone else decides to wield Mahalanir in 300 years, if Perrin's great 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 grandchild wields Mahalanir in the future, also hi Waffles. Waffles has joined the chat.
Oh, hey.
We were so lost nerding out on this. um uh yeah, whoever's wielding it, if they hit a shadow spawn with it, it will sizzle and +2 damage to shadow spawn. Okay. I believe that's pretty widely accepted stat increase.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the other thing though. I'm going to say that, and this is why it gets debatable, because Perrin has the soul of a wolf. He's a wolf brother. And what do they regard Darkhounds as? The twisted ones. Or I'm sorry, what was it, like the fallen brothers or something? But
Shadow Brother or something like that.
Shadow Brother or something. But they will go out of their way and lose the entire pack to take down a Darkhound. If Perrin
Yeah.
is a wolf brother and a piece of his soul is imparted into this hammer, I would say that there's +2 damage to Shadow Spawn, +5 damage to Darkhounds, and then which would also be an attribute increase to everybody, right? If anybody was wielding this and they hit a Darkhound with it, it would be +5 damage, not +2,
Yeah, they call him
because there
Shadow
is a
Brother.
piece of Perrin's soul in this hammer. But what I think is debatably the third attribute aspect would be the connection to Perrin. If Perrin is wielding the hammer and sees enemy, enemy gets +2 damage. If anybody else picks up that hammer and they attack a human who is not Shadow Spawn, not Darkhound, I believe there is no bonus damage, because it is not their soul that is imparted into this weapon.
Yeah, and that's why I said like the Bale the killing Darkhounds thing is impressive, the most impressive on the surface level.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at it more, like Perrin has a power wrought weapon that will harm Shadow Spawn across the board, but seems to be able to, at his will, differentiate between enemy and non, or enemy and not real enemy, or somebody that he want, like a target that he's hitting that he actually wants to destroy versus one he doesn't. Might be a more apt description, because I would hate to think, and it seems to imply that like if he was to spar with Galad after all of this, and he doesn't actually view Galad as an enemy, that Galad wouldn't get burned by being hit by Mjolnir. Now, who the fuck spars with a full-on warhammer? I don't know. They do it with swords, so fucking why not? But that's that's really unique. That's almost like a Terangrial like quality that's been
Yeah,
bestowed upon it.
it does, doesn't it?
I mean, the dude's got the Bernie toggle switch. Burny, not Bernie. Like, oh, I really don't like you. Now you're gonna burn. With
Yeah.
that too, hold on. What else do we know burn Shadow Spawn on touch? I don't know if it's all Shadow Spawn, but it definitely does it to the Golem. The Foxhead
Matt's
Medallion.
Foxhead Medallion.
I wonder if it burns any other
Ooh.
Shadow Spawn. Probably, I don't know.
It never does. It only ever touches the golem.
But yeah, we never see it touch another Shadow Spawn, but it'd be interesting to find out if it does or not.
We need to have an episode based purely on the relationship between the medallion, the one power, and the golem, because I feel like that's going to be a hell of an episode.
Yeah, we can do it. I think if we have done episodes about it, it's been a long time since we did dives into the different Shadow Spawn, and that could be a fun series to do. We do background breakdowns. Now we can start doing Shadow Spawn breakdowns.
We need to readdress some of our Shadow Spawn episodes, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fine with it. I literally have not done an episode on Murdraw since 2018. So
Which must be updated because we have new information about Murdraw from Origins of the Wheel of Time.
we do. Oh, I mean,
Yes,
yeah, we do.
yeah, we do.
I've definitely read it.
Yeah, I know. Anyway, thanks everybody for joining us tonight. We always love you guys hanging out with us because this is something we do. You know, I have to reference Streetlight Manifesto. It's a band, a ska band. If you know who they are, if you know, you know. But they make a statement that they make the music that they love because they love to make the music that they love, and they will keep making music whether or not they ever sell another record. And I'm going to be honest with you guys right now. Black Tower Podcast is here to stay. Andrew and I are going to continue enjoying talking about the Wheel of Time, regardless. We love the Wheel of Time. We love talking about the Wheel of Time, and that's what the Black Tower Podcast stands for. Is a place where you can come and enjoy talking about the Wheel of Time. And this episode, I think, was really great. I really love talking about topics in the Wheel of Time that translate really well into our world, our lives, into reality. Because I love seeing how smart Robert Jordan was, how knowledgeable he was, how intelligent, how amazing he was at weaving those real life themes into this fantasy book and breaking it down so that we could see that. And I really love that about the Wheel of Time. It's fantastic.
Yeah. I just love how we can keep finding topics. One, again, we're 6 years into our 7th year now, starting our
Yeah,
7th year of this podcast. And we're still finding new things to talk about or new ways to talk about things, which I think is more of a testament to just how massive the series is and how many things are actually included in the Wheel of Time series
it's true.
than anything else. But it's especially fun when we get to do these episodes that wind up encompassing like real world interests or passions that we have. So I don't know if you guys could tell that Josh has like a pretty decent wealth of knowledge when it comes to like minerals and rocks and metal and like weapon forging and stuff. Like I don't know if you could tell that, by the whole discussion on the molecular structure and differences between iron and steel. Um so it's always cool whenever you can like geek out in two ways at once,
Yes,
which is always super fun. It's like the freaking double mint commercials, like double the pleasure, double the fun with double mint spearmint gum or whatever it was called. I
double
don't know.
mint, spearmint come.
I just remember they always had the double mint twins, and I was like, they give me Shining vibes.
Come play with
So
us, Danny.
no, you
Fun,
taste
fun,
horrible.
fun side
After I brush
tangent.
my teeth, you make
I
orange juice
watched.
taste terrible. Leave me alone.
Have you ever watched Doctor Sleep?
No,
It is the sequel.
to what? Shining?
Yeah,
I didn't even know it
starring
had a sequel.
starring Ewan McGregor as
Oh,
Danny. Dude, it's good.
huh.
It's good. It's good.
I'll take your word for it. You want to know how many actual like Steven Spielberg films like The Shining and stuff I've actually watched that I can actively think of right now?
Choose your words carefully.
I mean, I could lie. I'm sure I have watched several because I'm really bad at remembering who made what movies I've watched,
Gotcha.
especially. But if you told me right now to name, did he do Amityville Horror?
I can't remember.
If he did, then I can guarantee say I've watched at least one. but I know I've never sat down and watched The Shining. I haven't watched what's the other one with the dude putting the axe through the door? Is that Psycho or something?
That's Shining.
Oh, it's all part of the same movie. Like, I haven't watched a lot of it, man. Like,
Hey, thanks
clearly.
everybody for joining us tonight. Thanks
Yeah.
everybody for tuning in, watching. Is there something about aligning the matrix that we missed? Is there something about forging that you think is interesting, that you think we should have talked about? Hey, leave it in the comments below, and we will address that appropriately. From all of us here at the Black Tower Podcast, we thank you for being here. We thank you for joining in for this week's dose of taint, and we hope you leave here just a little bit more insane than you were when you first got here. From all of us here, at the Black Tower, my name is Josh, and I have been your taint dispenser. More like taint consumer.
Sounds right. Just out there, just
Just put the taint in my mouth.
so, yeah. And join us next week when I continue to disappoint Josh with the amount of pop culture things I have not experienced.
Your homework is to watch The Shining.
Right. You and I both know that's not going to happen. I won't
It'll
remember by
happen right
tomorrow.
when you watch or when you read Newspring.
Well, the difference between those is one of those exists and the other one doesn't. So. Anyway, I have been Andrew, your Bison of Hell. Thank you so much for tuning in. And again, if you want more of the Black Tower taintiness, head on over to blacktowerpod.com. We got our Patreon and all of our other fun stuff there. Go and check it out for all the fun stuff. But we love you all, and we will see you all again next week for the next episode.